I'm not a professional scientist, but I am a member of the Geological Society of America, the Southwest Paleontological Society, National Center for Science Education, and I volunteer at the Arizona Museum of Natural History, where I am the Human Origins Specialist in the Origins Gallery down there. I would consider myself a science activist and a science educator. So going right into the presentation, we're going to cover 4 million years of human evolution here. We're going to start with Australopithecus, because we definitely want to show pre-human, and I think everybody would agree that Australopiths are pre-human. So starting with everyone's favorite, Lucy, discovered by Donald Johanson in 1974, Australopithecus afarensis. Her species is represented by fossils from over 400 individuals now. They lived in East Africa 3.8 to 2.9 million years ago. Was Lucy a chimp? No, Lucy wasn't a chimp. She was almost as different, or I should say chimps are almost as different from our common ancestor as we are. They've been evolving just as long as we have. So when you take Lucy's skeleton and you flip it over and superimpose it onto itself, it shows actually how complete it really is. Primates are asymmetrical, so we have a very complete skeleton there. Lucy was not a knuckle walker. Knuckle walking evolved after our split with our common ancestor. We see differences in the type of knuckle walking between chimps and gorillas. There's no evidence that Lucy was ever a knuckle walking chimp. Looking at their skulls, cranial capacity ranged from 375 to 530 cc's. The variation is due to sexual dimorphism, where males would be larger than females. And we're going to pay attention to the cranial capacity here as we go along. No modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers, originating from the same layers as Australopithecus afarensis. So Australopithecus africanus is next up. Tongchild was the first one, discovered in 1924. We believe that skull was of a 3-year-old. They lived in South Africa 3.3 to 2.1 million years ago. Again, several hundred fossil specimens have been found, and they overlapped with afarensis in East Africa just for a few 100,000 years there. Were they a chimp? No, I mean, completely different now. You look at the difference in the skulls. This and Africanus had longer arms and shorter legs than modern humans, but that's because they were a transitional species. Evidence for bipedalism in Australopithecines. We have placement of the foramen magnum at the base of the skull. We have the attachment of neck muscles to the skull, shape of their spine, angle of their knees. They had no divergent big toe, fixed arches in their foot, side to side and front to back, and the shape of the pelvis, which we can tell whether they were bipedal or not by the shape of their pelvis. Cranial capacity averaged 485 cc's. Compared to afarensis, we see already a less projecting face, more rounded skull, no cranial crest, and smaller dentition. So they're getting a little bit closer to us. And again, no modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers as afarensis or africanus. Pithecus sediba was a fairly new one, discovered 2008 by 8-year-old Matthew Berger, son of Lee Berger. We're up to 1.98 million years ago, so just under 2 million years. Lots of different features to them. I'm not really going to take the time to cover all that. We're going to keep moving right along. Homo habilis, again, just under 2 million years ago, first discovered by the Leakeys in Kubifora, Kenya. And these are the early tool makers. Now, we might have seen evidence with tool makers prior, but this is the first species that's associated with tool making by design, with something with an end product in mind. Chimps might use a rock or a stick, but the closest we've seen them to designing tools is stripping leaves off of a stick to get at termites. These are the Olawan style tools dating back as far as 2.5 million years, discovered in Olavi Gorge by Leakeys. Again, an end product in mind, but not a real refined type of tool. Homo rudolfensis, which some people will consider Homo habilis, again at 1.9 million years ago, so just under 2 million years. Look at that cranial capacity. Now we're up to 775 cc's. We're seeing a gradual increase here in brain size. And again, no modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers as Homo habilis. Homo erectus, these were the most successful humans so far. They were around for about 1.75 million years. First species to leave Africa. So they were around from 1.89 million years to 143,000 years ago. The early cranial capacity we see on average is 850 cc's, and the later up to 1100 cc's. So we can see the brain's getting larger again. African Homo erectus, some people will call Homo ergaster. This is one at 1.75 million years with a cranial capacity of 850 cc's. Again, most successful human species so far. Homo erectus, Turcana skull at 1.5 million years, cranial capacity 880 cc's, discovered at Lake Turkana. We've got Turcana. We can tell his age. He still had his wisdom teeth. So that's one of the ways we can tell age from some of these bones in the dirt. Male pelvis, long legs, 5'3" tall. Asian Homo erectus. This is one of the skulls discovered in Java, but a more recent discovery, 1969, not the early Java man. Cranial capacity there, 1,000 cc's already we're seeing. And just to cover again, if you line these skulls up, Africanus, habilis, erectus, and I do this at the museum when I'm speaking there and talking with children there. It's so obvious that an 8 or 10-year-old can put them back in the right order. I can mix them up and be talking with these kids and ask them to put them back in the right order. I mean, and they'll put them in the right order based on these different transitional features. Again, we're seeing 435 to 530, average 450 cc's on a brain size on the Africanus. Homo habilis averages 680. Homo erectus averages 1,000. We're seeing a transition happen right there. And no modern human brains have ever been found in the same layers as Homo erectus. But what we do find is Acheulean hand axes. Stone tool technology advances with increase in brain size. We see crude hand axes at 1.75 million years. And then as recently as under 1 million years, we start seeing them really get refined. These are found in Asia, Africa, North America. The Native Americans used them. So Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo neanderthalensis, and is all use the same tool technology. So here's heidelbergensis. These are ancestral to Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalensis, and they were around from about 700,000 to 200,000 years ago. Again, we're kind of looking at where they fit in the chain of things here. We have lots of remains of these guys. There was 28 individuals dated to 430,000 years old. They used 6 different methods to come up with the date range on those. We've actually pulled DNA out of Homo heidelbergensis. We know that they shared a common ancestor with the Denisovans. We're going to get to them in a minute, but also had Neanderthal-like features. Skulls from. This is the Cobway skull, and this would be 300,000 years ago. We're getting to now heidelbergensis. Some would call it rhodesiensis. So again, African. Sometimes there are people they call splitters that split them into different species, but we still see large brow ridges. But now we're getting a flat face like modern humans. We've got the low brain case profile like Homo erectus, but the brain size is 1,300 cc's. So by 300,000 years ago, we've seen almost modern human average brain size, and no modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers. The Neanderthals, everybody's favorite caveman here, found in Europe and Western Asia, went extinct by 39,000 years ago. Again, hundreds of fossil specimens found. First discovered in 1829. They didn't know what it was really. The type specimen, Neander 1, is from the Neander Valley. That's where they got their name. But that was discovered in 1856. This is the most complete Neanderthal skull here, discovered in 1909, 70,000 years old. Cranial capacity over 1,600 cc's. So actually, a lot of these early Neanderthals had a brain size larger than modern humans. This is the one that pretty much debunked the earlier theory that Neanderthals were stooped, brutish creatures. But we don't believe that anymore. That was a lot of political and religious kind of stuff from back in the 1800s that caused that. Comparison with modern humans, we different species, conical rib cage, thicker hand bones, wider pelvis, shorter lower legs. There's a lot of differences in the skull. Of course, the shape of the brain case, occipital bone at the back of the skull used for muscle attachments, their noses, the nasal bone projected, and they had no chin. They also had the larger brow ridge. So 550,000 years, after the last mating, we can see measurable impacts on gene expression. If you are living in, if you have a European ancestry, you have up to 5% Neanderthal DNA in you. And let's see, they use radiocarbon dates on the Neanderthal remains. It's one of the only species because some of them are below 50,000 years that were able to do that. And we can tell that Neanderthals did not disappear all at once. So they didn't die out one time. They died off at different times, different parts of the world. Denisovans, now this is a fairly new species discovered. The only thing we have is two, actually I think they just discovered a third tooth. So we have a couple teeth and a pinky bone. We know that we have the genome though. So we know that up to 5% of Southeast Asians have, they have up to 5% Denisovan DNA. And we can tell how they split by using genetic markers. By sequencing ancient and modern DNA, comparing differences and calculating how much time was needed for the variations to accumulate, scientists can create timelines for when different populations split. Current model shows genetic splits that would have occurred several generations after the human populations became separated geographically. Over here we can see back, we're right around just before Homo heidelbergensis with Homo erectus here. Heidelbergensis is right in here. We can see where the Denisovans and the Neanderthals split and where modern humans are. And we can tell this because we have the Denisovan genome, the Neanderthal genome, the modern human genome, and the Homo heidelbergensis genome. Evidence. Homo naledi is a real recent one, discovered in 2013, described by Lieberger in 2015. When they were first discovered, we didn't know how old they were. Again, dated by 6 different methods now. They've got them down to a range between 235 and 335,000 years ago. They were found in the Rising Star Cave in South Africa near Johannesburg. And over 1,500 fossil specimens from 15 individuals are brought up, and Lieberger says there's more down there. There's another fossil Lieberger discovered. That was me right there. I was his opening act at the Mesa Arts Center back in March here, and got to share on the second day with thousands of children talking about human evolution. It's a great outreach thing we do with the museum here in Mesa. This is a Homo naledi skull and hand that were donated by Lieberger to our museum. Again, 6 different dating methods used. Dating methods include electron spin resonance, and oxygen isotope analysis, neither of which require us to know initial parent-daughter ratios. Some of the features, again, we're going to kind of breeze through this, but from the waist up, they were almost like an Australopith. Long arms, curved fingers, small shoulders, small head, but from the waist down, they were just like modern humans. And I'm holding a fossil in my hand. Creationists can't figure this out. I'd like to know what Kent thinks about them. We've got the Core Academy of Science over here saying they're fully human. We've got Answers in Genesis saying they're fully ape. They can't figure this out. Institute for Creation Research, they gave up. They said they're imaginary creatures. I mean, scientists have been duped, so they wouldn't even try. So public access paleontology is what Lieberger's all about. You can download 3D printable files. They're available for everyone. No more of this hiding fossils and locking them away in safes. Modern paleontology is very open, and we won't see things that happened before happen again as far as not having access to these fossils. Again, over 1,500 specimens, but wait, there's more. The Lissetti chamber. Lieberger announced more individuals. 3 more individuals were found in a different chamber. He announced that on May 9th of this year. And again, no modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers. This is the little hobbit guy, Homo floresiensis. They nicknamed him the Hobbit because their adults were only 3.5 feet tall, and they had big feet. So we do find them using crude stone tools, though, and fire pits. We find the bones, charred bones with the cut marks on them where they were. We also know now that it looks like they evolved from Homo habilis. They are not a dwarf species of Homo erectus. Now, looking 200 to 300,000 years ago, we had all these different human species alive on different parts of the planet. Example of this happening today would be with baboons. Genetic and fossil evidence shows modern baboons originated in South Africa. As groups became isolated, they diverged into 5 different species. These species may produce offspring in hybrid zones, but some remain genetically isolated. So it takes millions of years for large mammal species to become completely reproductively isolated. Olive baboons in the middle here, they started off as a hybrid. Then they became a very successful species, probably the most. But we see differences in physical traits. We see difference in cultural traits between all these different species of baboons. And I believe it's the same type of thing. I'm not saying we came from baboons. I'm saying I'm comparing what we see currently with baboons with what happened 200 to 300,000 years ago with humans. Genetic evidence, we've completed genomes for all these. Accumulation of neutral mutations occurs with enough regularity to provide a molecular clock. It gives us an estimate of how long ago each species diverged, and it aligns with our known fossil record. And the DNA studies also align with the known fossil record. Archaeology, if we want to talk about bones in the dirt, what can we learn from the study of osteoarchaeology? A lot of times we would know where the person lived, where we found them. We would know when they lived because we can date the fossils. How old they were when they died, a lot of times we can tell that. Sometimes we can tell how they died. We know of, for example, of a murder that occurred in Spain 430,000 years ago. Sometimes we can tell whether they died of disease, whether they were killed, male or female, and we can see primitive versus derived traits, being early traits that we see in species that came before, and then the derived traits would be something that shows up then and continues on after that. Forensic facial reconstruction, because I know there's going to be people saying, oh gosh, look at, he used all those pictures, they made those up. Well, we can tell what a species looked like. No one really knows what an individual looked like, but forensic facial reconstruction is a real thing. It's been used to solve crimes. It's makes for a great visual presentation too. So dating fossils is done using both absolute and relative dating methods following scientific laws. So if anyone's going to say we can't date these fossils, they've got 2 scientific laws here that they're going to have to show why we should not accept them. For example, in Kubi 4 of Kenya, over 200 layers of volcanic tuff were dated and chemically analyzed. So we have 200 layers throughout that geological column that they've made just for that area. 200 layers have been dated and tested. Lucy shows up in the middle of the column there, showing up at about 3.18 million years old. All these different layers, we have different thin layers of volcanic ash that can be dated. And this shows where the first family dates a little bit older. The first knee joint that Johansen discovered in 1973 is actually quite a bit older than Lucy was. Testing our theory. How would we test the theory of evolution? And as far as human evolution, we would, to test the hypothesis about the change of kind from early species to modern humans, we would predict that we would find evidence in the fossil record for such a transitional change. We would predict the recent layers would contain modern humans. At some point, anatomically, modern humans would cease to exist in the fossil record, and we would only see evidence of species with both those primitive and derived traits, becoming more primitive as the fossils get older, ending up with only these early apes in the oldest layers. That's exactly what we see. We never see human remains in with any of these primitive species or older fossil remains. Never see it. Over 6,000 individuals now we have cataloged in hominin evolution. We're just talking about humans here. If you look at the fossil record as a whole, most creationists will agree to microevolution. Oh yeah, microevolution happens. They have to. I mean, because we see these changes. But if you lined up all these skulls and put them in a row, you're seeing microevolution from one to the other. And if you look at it over as a whole, it becomes macro. I mean, you can line up Australopithecus on the left, modern human on the right, and every little minor change is a macro change. But you go back and look at the first skull and the last skull, and everybody's going to say, oh yeah, that's a different species. That's macroevolution. We just witnessed a change in kind by studying the fossil record. Australopithecus afarensis female on the left, Homo sapiens female on the right. I don't think anybody's going to disagree that we have two different species there. To argue against this, let me join you, because this march of progress type thing for human evolution is not what we see in the fossil record. It was something that was dreamed up 150 years ago, but we have much more like a bush. It's not a straight ladder-like progression. So again, the difference between us and the other apes is great, but we didn't evolve from them. If you could line up all the hominin ancestors, you could see the transition. If we could stand all our ancestors in front of us today, you could see the transition. So millions of years of human evolution, the evidence cannot be denied. Charles Darwin would be pleased to see the transitional species in the fossil record today, just as predicted. Thank you.